Hey everyone, welcome back to the SwiftUI series. Today we're exploring one of the most powerful tools in Xcode, the SwiftUI View Library. Now this is something that I don't typically use in a lot of my videos. I'm a little bit old school where I like to kind of type everything out, but I want to kind of show you how you can use this tool in order to learn more or make some pretty cool SwiftUI views in just minutes. So I have a little example on the preview here. So the built-in library allows us to drag, drop, and customize UI components with ease without writing tons of code. We will be writing just the smallest bit of code today, but a majority of the code found within this content view here has just been dragged and dropped, and we've just been changing things like the properties, changing the foreground colors from orange and things like that. By the end of this tutorial, you'll know how to use SwiftUI core views like text, images, and buttons, organize your UI with stacks, spacers, and navigation views, apply powerful modifiers using these SwiftUI View Library tools, and you can design a polished App Store ready screen like this one in minutes. Don't judge my color choices, okay? I'm just showing off different things. Let's go ahead and dive on in. Okay, let's go ahead and create a new project. As always, if you want to add this to an existing project, feel free to do so. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and do the SwiftUI app template, interface, SwiftUI, and language on Swift. So the SwiftUI library, it can be found with this kind of plus sign all the way in the top right of our application. You can also go to the top of the screen, and under the view, you can hit the show library. If you want to do the hotkey, it is Shift Command L. So SwiftUI is a modern declarative way to build user interfaces for Apple platforms, and instead of writing long UI code, we can drag and drop pre-built views. So in this library, we have some core UI components in this first tab here. So things like text, buttons, images, TextField. You can scroll through these. See, we have the kind of controls here, and we'll even get to the next section of layout. And you can see here we have things like spacers, VStacks, right? Different things like that. And there's also advanced features. You can scroll down, you can even see we have some gradients, which we'll be using later. And there's even some other things like color, circle, async images. On the next tab, we have the modifiers. So these are different modifiers that we can use in our project. You can even see like things like sheets or tab items, toolbars. If you scroll down more, we have effects. We could change the brightness of things, contrast. You can explore these libraries, and the nice thing is, let's say we want to learn more about the foreground style. There are examples on the right side. So example, this shows the foreground style and changing the foreground to be teal. And if you go to the bottom of any of these, you can also open it in the developer documentation. The other great thing is these are all drag and droppable. So if we select the foreground style, we can actually drag it onto our code here. I'm just going to make a new line so it looks a bit cleaner, but we can see that we have the foreground style, and it's also given us the option to update this, right? Oftentimes we'll get a bunch of recommendations, or even within the object library itself. In the case of our foreground style, we can even see that we have an example of using .teal. So if you're like me and you love doing the dot notation, this is also a good way to learn a little bit more about those, right? In the case of dot font, if we go to our object library and we go to the modifiers and we search, we can find it within the object library and we can learn a lot more about it. You can also do things like the quick help, right? So if we select the item, we right click, show quick help, and you'll also be getting some useful information here as well. So all of these tools are built into Xcode for you to use and explore. So let's go ahead and actually recreate a UI using all of these tools. So I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of our placeholder here. I'm going to create a little bit of space. That's something I like to do when using the drag and drop. So let's go ahead to our first category here and let's add some text. So you can either search for it or you can use the kind of search bar at the top to look for text. We can drag and drop. And we do notice that we have a placeholder, and it is also highlighted because it's suggesting, hey, you should probably change what's in this text. You can select on it. We're going to go ahead and add our quotation marks, and let's say hello, SwiftUI. If you want to put any custom text in here, you of course can. And because we're writing minimal code in this episode, let's now go to our modifiers. So things that we would normally use to change how things look. Like I usually use that dot notation for, and let's actually update that font. So we have our font. Let's drag and drop it in, and we can see that even comes pre-prepared with the title, and it is suggesting that we can change this. Let's change it to large title instead. We can also update the foreground style. All right, we've found our foreground style. Let's go ahead and add that, and we can update the color. I'm going to do dot orange, I think. I was going with kind of like the Swift orange today. So we haven't really written any code. We've just changed what's within the arguments of the font and the foreground style. You can also use foreground color, but I believe that one is being depreciated. Okay, let's go ahead and now add an image. So because this is something that we're going to be controlling or seeing, the first tab is typically your controls and views. Let's go ahead and type out image. And we see here that we can drag and drop an image down, and we just need to source the image name. The one thing I would do for images is actually, if we're going to be using SF images, is go to the star tab all the way on the right side. These are SF symbols that are commonly found throughout apps that you can actually drag and drop in, and they're already set up to be images. So in the case of my example, I'm going to do a bird, and let's go ahead and do the circle bird fill. We can drag and drop it. We now have an image with a system named bird. It's pretty small right here. So let's go ahead and make it a little bit bigger. So we'll go to the second tab with our modifiers, right? We need to make it resizable. So image resizable, go ahead and drag and drop that onto our page. Okay, that's pretty big. I think we're gonna have to fit it to a frame. Let's go back here, frame, right? So you can see you can actually just build out apps without writing any code really. We can even see that suggesting that we change the width and the height. So let's change this to be 150 and 150. If you're curious on things like aspect ratio, you can even drag and drop that. And it does come with that kind of different content mode. I love to use the dot notation as much as I can. We can even do fill or fit, right? You can really play around with any of these things and make your own without having to write a whole bunch of code. Let's also update the foreground style. And we'll set this one to be orange as well. Cool, next let's add a button underneath. So we'll hit the plus button. Because the button is something that we see or interact with, it's going to be found within that first tab. We can see that the button is available right at the start. Let's go ahead and drag and drop that button in. So we can change the text within that button. I'm just going to have this one be called Press Me. For the action, we don't really need anything. I also want to call out the code snippet library here as well. So this is the third tab. It has some braces. If you're ever forgetting on how to, declare a function, so in this case, a function statement, if you want to, look up, if-else statements, right? This code snippet library is also drag and droppable, and it also has the kind of guidelines. For our action, we're not going to have any, so I'm actually just going to either empty it or put a comment. If you want to do a print statement, button tapped, feel free to do so. Okay, we can make some modifiers to our button here. We can even go ahead and go to the second tab. We can explore padding. It's actually interesting that it defaults with .all because if you make it blank, it does feel like it's already kind of all. Let's go ahead and also augment the background. So I'll type in background, we can drag and drop that. And you can see that we can either change it to be a view, it can be a color. So we're going to go ahead and set this to be color.blue. Now we can no longer see our text, so let's go ahead and update the foreground style once again. And let's set this to be maybe white. And fans of the channel know, I was typing channel, corner radius. Yeah, you can even see the example here. Let's go ahead and add some of that corner radius in. It suggests 3.0, way too low for my liking. I am a corner radius fiend. It kind of more looks like a pill, maybe 15 looks a little bit better. But we haven't written any code. All we've done is change what's in the parameters. If you're ever curious about what can go within the parameters, that's where I'd either check out the examples that are available within these object libraries, right, in the case of the text, or I would start to use that dot notation and documentation. All right, let's go ahead and add a text field, and I'm actually going to add it above our button here. So if we go to the text field, which would probably be found within the first option, something we see or interact with, we also see we have the secure text field. So this is displaying the 1 dot for characters for things such as passwords, and actually hides the dots when someone takes a screenshot in iOS, which is pretty cool. Also will display if your caps lock is enabled. We just want a standard run-of-the-mill text field. Try not to get discouraged with these larger code examples. These are here to support you. We can see that we're actually using something that's a state private variable to track the username. And this is something that we're going to be doing when we have the text field. Because when we have the text field, if we want to store it or update it somewhere, we actually need to create a variable and have that binding connection. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag and drop the text field on, and you can see that we have the placeholder. So maybe we can put in, enter your name, and then we have the value of text. We'll see that just update on the screen. So this is where we're going to have to create that binding. We'll just call this one name. If we go back and look at the example for the text field, we can see that they've used the $sign for their username, and that is the same thing found within the state private variable. And it's found above the view. So if we go and recreate that, so here's our variable body some view, we can even just paste that. In this case, they called it username. I'm just going to correct it to be name. We can see that our code fixes. So we're tracking the state of this variable of name, and anytime we update it within the text field, it's going to be updating that variable, which is pretty cool. And all of this, I'm kind of just paraphrasing from the information found within the object library. They also have some things like if it's focused, we can even do a .onSubmit. If you want to learn more about .onSubmit, well, that's also found within the library. If you go to the second tab on Submit, there's more information there. This is really just a great tool for you to learn and explore SwiftUI with. If you're someone who used a lot of UIKit, you'll definitely be loving the dragging and dropping. Cool, we can even see that we have some other options, and we can either go explore them in the object library, or we can just go ahead and copy and paste these at the end of our text field. So we can kind of use the English that we know to figure out what these things do. The text input auto capitalization, well, that should make it so whenever we're typing, it'll never use auto capitalization. This can be good for usernames, emails, passwords. We can even disable auto correction. So if you have a name that gets auto corrected all the time, you probably know all about that, and you can make that true or false. And we also have a border option for secondary. So if we go and click on our text field here, and I go to enter a name, let's do Terry, right? It's not auto correcting it. It's not auto capitalizing it. These are really, really cool things, all found within the modifiers as well. And you know what? In our, we're not writing code, a lot of it today. Let's go ahead and drag and drop some padding in there. Create a little bit of space around the view. Now, let's take these elements and organize them within a structured layout. So there's a couple different ways you can be adding those structures or layouts. The first one is to select the object, so in this case the VStack, and right click on it, and you can embed different things. So if we embed this in a ZStack, we can see that everything found is now wrapped in that ZStack. The other way you can do this, I'm just going to Command Z here. The other way we can do this is if we go to our object library, we actually have the option under views. If we were to scroll down, we have layout. So we have our HStack here, or horizontal stack. We even have the lazy variations. We have spacers, we have vertical stacks. But I don't think I see a ZStack in here, unless I'm missing it. Interesting. Oh, it's called a depth stack. Okay, there we go. I was like, that kind of makes sense. However, I do recommend if you're wrapping stacks within one another, I would do the right click, and then it kind of wraps and saves you a lot of headache, but you can also drag things in that way. So with the VStack, things are going to stack from top to bottom. We can see in our example here, the code is sequential and top to bottom. If we were to select these two objects here, right click, embed in HStack. Sometimes it doesn't like to grab everything, so I'm just gonna cut and paste in here. We can see now that the objects go from left to right in sequential order. but because this HStack is within the VStack, it's still part of the top to bottom. So you can play around with these stacks and really get creative with it. I'm going to go ahead and undo that. I'm actually quite happy with how my UI currently is. The next thing we can explore are spacers. So spacers allow us to push things all the way to the top or all the way to the bottom, depending on where we put them. Within our views, actually, because I was talking about this earlier, because it's something that deals with layout, we can drag and drop that there. So let's see what happens. If we put the spacer in between the text and the image, it's going to do its best to create as much space as possible between those elements. So we don't really want to have that happen, but I do want to push everything else to the top. So after our button here, there's where we can add the spacer. I'm just going to push everything as far up as I can. All right, let's talk a little bit about navigation. So if we go to our views here and we search navigate, we see we have a few options. The first is a navigation link, a view that controls a navigation presentation, so being able to go from screen to screen. We even have a little example here where we're going to the folder detail and we're passing the ID within the parameters. We even have a label and a system image. So let's go ahead and drag and drop under our button this navigation link. So for the destination where we want to go, we're going to be creating a new kind of page called detail view. So let's go ahead and reference that with the empty brackets. And then let's go back here and let's even just copy and paste the label content here just to save some more time. So maybe instead of the work folder, I'll put learning list, and we can leave that as a folder. We can even change that to list. We can explore the SF library if we want. So now we need to be able to get to the detail view. So let's go ahead and create it. We are going to be writing a little bit of code, and here's where we're going to be creating the detail view. If you want to save some more time, you can, kind of create your own SwiftUI file template, and that would also probably be a little bit faster. I'm just going to use the autofill, and it's not too bad. So we can see we have our little learning list on the right side, but if we're clicking on it, we're not quite moving yet. So the next step we have to do is we'll type navigate again, is we actually need to make our original view here conform to the navigation view. So if we look at navigation view, it allows us to have the stack of views that can kind of go throughout the hierarchy. So we can drag and drop this into our project. We're actually not going to need the destination here. We're actually going to take this brace. We're going to delete it, and then we're going to go to the end of the VStack. Let's go here, let's go after the padding, and add the brace one more time. So now when we press the learning list, we go to the view, we have the little back button. You can even hide that if you wanted to. Now that was a little more difficult. Now the other solution I have, so I'm actually just going to go back. Before we have the navigation view, is for the VStack, you can right click, and although there is no embedded navigation, you can simply use the embed, and for the container, you can type out navigation view. So this way we can double click on this. We can see that the entire VStack is wrapped. So if you don't trust yourself with the braces, you can embed and then type out the view. Just to show you it still works, learning list, go back. If you did want to, go to the project properties here, and we go to navigation, and we go to properties, you can see that we can actually hide the navigation bar. You can change the navigation title. You know what, let's go ahead and actually add that navigation title. We're going to have to make sure that it is within the navigation view itself. You can see that we have a title. Let me just call this one like screen or something, right? Alrighty, our learning list looks a little bit out of place. So what we can do is in the label, we can add a few different properties. So if we go to our modifiers, let's go ahead and add some padding. We can add a background. I do like to kind of put these on their own lines. Let's have this one be maybe green. You can always play around with colors and make them how you want. Do the foreground style. So So you can see as you get better with these tools, you might even be faster at dragging and dropping than I am at typing. Maybe we'll have this one also be white, just so we have a little bit of brand continuity. And let's see, and let's go ahead and add some corner radius. You can also make this one 15. You can also, if you want these to conform, make them both with copy and pasting. There's so many tools where you can really speed up yourself in Xcode. So the next thing is that our frame is currently a little bit wacky. So what I want to show off next is the kind of parameters tab found within a lot of these views and within these modifiers. So these are what you can use, or sometimes just the most common use case ones. Or sometimes just the most common use case ones. So in the case of frame, we see here that we have the parameters, and we have min width, ideal width, and they all have these kind of descriptions next to them. So if we add the frame here, and we can go back and we can even look at what we can do if you want to even copy and paste. So if we go here, we can do the dot, and we can even see what we can set things to. In this case, we want to look under the frame, and we want to actually change the max width. You can copy and paste that max width, use our dot notation, and let's go ahead and set that to be infinity. Well, not a whole lot changes. This is because just like with our other code, the order matters. So now if we were to go under the padding before we're initializing the background and we add the frame, we can then make it stretch all the way to the side of the screen no matter what phone the user is using. So as a reminder, the order of your code, of the properties, does matter. We can even go ahead and copy and paste this. Let's go to our button, and before the background, we can also make that one infinity. Okay, let's learn how we can use gradients. So in the case of the navigation view specifically, anything that's visual has to go after. So we're actually going to select and right click on our VStack here, and we're going to embed it in a ZStack or ZStack. And let's go ahead and add a gradient background. And I know in a lot of my examples I type this out, and I never really used the gradients within here. Let's go to the first tab and we can look at the gradients. Let's select the linear gradient. That's the one I'm most familiar with, but you can do whichever one you want. And let's drag and drop it. You can see that we have some code, and well, it immediately appears on the screen. We can also see the different recommendations for us to change. So whenever you select on these objects, it's not always going to have the full code snippet, right? When you look at this and you drag and drop it, this looks much different from this. So sometimes you'll just want to actually play around with these different elements by dragging and dropping them and seeing what's really going on. So in the case of the colors, maybe I'll just keep the red and blue, and I'll keep the leading and trailing, but you can play around with these, right? If you wanted to change the dot notation for this one, maybe this one's bottom, and then this one's perhaps leading, right? You can make your own custom gradients, which is pretty cool. The next problem is it doesn't go all the way off the edges of the screen. So in that case, we would have to have the edges ignoring safe area or ignore safe area. So let's go ahead and drop that in. Just to be safe, you can always set this to also be dot all if it's not giving you the desired look. Let's go ahead and maybe update the opacity. Let's drag and drop that in. And it's suggesting we change these numbers. Maybe we'll change these to 0.2. That looks pretty cool. It looks pretty polished. So with the ZStack, we have things that can kind of go back and forth. I typically just use a lot of this for stacking, images on top of one another, or kind of using this to create different colored backgrounds. This home screen looks pretty good. We can just press the buttons, we can type our name within the text field, but our learning list is a little bit lackluster. So let's go down here and, let's spruce it up. So I'm going to get rid of our placeholder text here. I'm just going to create a little bit more space. And what's something we haven't explored within our views? Maybe a list. How about we go ahead and add a list? Let's drag and drop the list in. We can see that suggests list with content. We can even copy and paste this list that has multiple text options. We can kind of see how that looks like. We go to the learning list. We see that we have a whole bunch of different options here. The first item, second item, etc. You'll also notice we don't have a navigation title. So even though this isn't itself a navigation view, this is just something we navigate to, we can still add the navigation titles. Let's go navigation, modifiers, and let's add a title in. And let's just have this one be my list. Let's look at how we can customize this a little bit more. If we go to navigation, we can even navigation back bar hidden. What if we go ahead and drag and drop that in? Currently it's set to false. What happens if we set this to true? Oh, the back bar is hidden. Now we're stuck here forever. So you would either want other logic to go to another page. Otherwise, this is just my eternity now. So if we set this back to false, all right, our home screen is certainly there. Cool. One thing to note with lists is there's a lot of built-in modifiers for lists, which is really great. We can change the list item tint, the background, we can disable the deleting, we can change the swipe items, make it so you can't move. There's so many different cool things that we can do with list, and there's even like list styles here too, right? We can do our dot notation, we can do an inset list, right? So now it kind of more has those lines to change them. Alrighty, and this is our very basic app UI that we have created. Let's go ahead and run it on the simulator real quick. And here's our UI we've created. We wrote pretty much no code. We changed a couple parameters and things like that. We did a little bit of copy and pasting, but you can see how easy it is with dragging and dropping to create user interfaces. But I really want you, if you're someone who's interested in learning more about SwiftUI, to explore the object library, do some searching. In the case of the list, check out the examples. And if you ever want to learn more, there's always the developer documentation. You can check out some more of my videos or other content creators. All the tools you really need to get going are found within Xcode. The exception would be APIs. How cool would it be if I imported ChartKit and all of a sudden I had a chart library that I can copy and paste from? That would be quite amazing. Maybe in a future update, we'll see. But this is something that really, especially if you're migrating over from UIKit, is a wonderful, wonderful tool for some examples, and it really makes coding a lot more approachable. If you're old school like this guy here, you'll probably continue to write most of your code on your own, but I'll still sometimes come up here and be like, oh yeah, how do I use a date picker? Here's an example, here's some things that I can change, right? It's almost how we like for this example, we have the whole little code snippet we can just totally steal and make our own, which is really fun. So if you want to take this app further, try adding some forms and toggles for a setting page, customize those animations. I have a video on that, and look to use dark mode support. A hint for dark mode is actually the preferred color scheme. So you can see here is dark mode equals true, and then you can toggle on between dark mode and light mode. There you go, a little hint for you. But let me know in the comments below what app you're planning on creating, or if you're just interested in learning more about SwiftUI. I hope you have a wonderful day. Like, comment, subscribe, and dream big, code bigger, and we'll see you in the next one.